It's baffled scholars for 2 millennia. It is a puzzle made of multi-dimensional elements, an enigma with roots that reach back to the dawning of time, perhaps before. Daniel explained part of it. Ezekiel and Isaiah had glimpses into it. John saw it all for the time of the end. That time is now. Join Derek and Sharon Gilbert on a journey that spans the course of history, from Eden to Mount Hermon, from Hermon to Babel, from Babel to Rome, from Rome to the cross, and from there to us. Biblical prophecy is coming true before your eyes, and to understand it, you must discern the times both then and now. It's time to unravel the threads of this all-encompassing prophetic paradox. It's time to unravel Revelation.
The four horsemen of the apocalypse, they're actually riding at God's command and His direction. Welcome to Unraveling Revelation. I'm Derek Gilbert. We're excited to have back for week number 2 of a discussion of his brand new book, The Four Horsemen, The Winds of Theopolitical Change. And I have to correct myself because through the entire episode last week, I mispronounced his name, Curtis Liebel. Curtis, thank you for sticking around here, especially after I got your name. Bad host. Bad. I should have asked, and I am so sorry for getting that wrong.
Perfectly
It is
fine.
Curtis Liebel, and this is a really interesting take on the four horsemen of the apocalypse and why it's relevant to us now, contrary to many Bible teachers, many prophecy teachers assume that the four horsemen don't ride until the beginning of the 7-year period called the Great Tribulation.
Yeah.
Sharon and I disagree. We've got our own, if you go back into our archives, which you can find on our app, gilberthouse.org/app, go back into the archives, you'll get our take on it. But Curtis, I know we said we jump off here onto national sovereignty, and we'll get to that in a minute because that, I think, is something that's very top of mind given what's going on in the world today and has been going on for years.
Right.
But when, in your view, did the four horsemen begin to ride?
I believe they've rode since the beginning of nations. And we see their function. So a lot of people are looking for the words, four horsemen. We can even look for the four winds or the four spirits that we talked about last time. But what I believe that it becomes more apparent is once we identify the function of each horse, the white horse, the red horse, the black horse, the pale horse, then we can see that function happening, for example, with the rise and fall of Egypt. We can see that function happening with the rise and fall of the metal kingdoms of Daniel.
Right.
And then we can identify their actions, and we're going to actually find words like in the metal kingdoms, Daniel 7 verse 2, that it's the four winds of heaven that actually cause the waters to stir and these empires to rise. So once we get there, then it's just identifying the function. Mm-hmm. And so if God uses these forces every time He wants a nation to rise or fall, or He wants to change theopolitics, change the geography of the world, the nations, then their function has been with us since nations have been formed.
And I agree. And again, I encourage you to go back into the archives and watch last week's program if you haven't, because the discussion of the four spirits, the four winds, in many of the English translations,
Yes.
Being sent by God. That is, I think, key to understanding what's going on here. So back to present day. We're seeing wars and rumors of war. I mean, clearly the war between Ukraine and Russia, Ukraine and Russia, but actually NATO and Russia, for the last 3 years, has occupied a lot of the news here in the West. Mm-hmm. There's also a concern that China may try to retake Taiwan. Obviously, since October 7th of 2023, you've got the clash between Israel and violent Islamist neighbors like Hamas and Hezbollah, Palestinian Islamic Jihad, and so forth, which is really just the latest front in a 1,400-year war between Islam and the West.
Right.
How is all of this manifesting today in the loss of national sovereignty, and what is it leading towards?
Well, we start with this idea that to get to the place where we can have a one world global system, it's going to take longer than 7 years. So if we are in our minds looking at the four horsemen accomplishing such a huge event in a short period of time, I think we're missing something. And so we have to back up. There's a prophecy in Scripture, in the book of Haggai, that talks about the shaking of the nations. He says, in the end, I will shake the nations and the kingdoms. And that shaking is taking away national sovereignty and making way for this global cabal, if you will. Mm-hmm. And so when did that occur? And we have to go now look at history. And I believe there's some very strong indicators of when the nations began to shake. There's a few powerful empires and kingdoms in our modern last 100-year period that come to the forefront. And the first is at the turn of the 20th century, 1912, we see that the 2,000 years of dynasties in China fell. Now, that's a huge indicator. When you have a dynasty that's been in power that long and it just all of a sudden it's no longer, there's a shaking there. Mm-hmm. And actually Marxism was the force behind China's ideological change there. Then you have something else. A few years later, you have the Bolshevik Revolution in 1917, which 200 and some years of czars fell. That power structure was changed. It was communism that brought that. And then you have a key piece, which is the Ottoman Empire. And the Ottoman Empire held power over the Levant. Nothing was going to change until the Ottomans were taken out of the way, until Islam was set aside in that area. And it made a pathway for Israel to become a nation again. So now this goes to what I believe was the mission of the White Horse. There's two defining missions that the White Horse has to accomplish according to the way I see Revelation 6 unfolding. And that is his first mission is to assemble the nations to the global cabal. He's the force. He's the one moving the chess pieces, bringing sovereignties down so that international cooperation and connection can happen. And the second mission of the White Horsemen is to make a pathway for the nation of Israel to rise again. That's his mission. So mm-hmm. he's got to accomplish that. Conquering and to conquer is the term, mm-hmm. which you have a double use of a word, which means it's going to be so. I believe that's an emphasis. It's not that conquering and to conquer are two different words or ideas. It simply means what he sets out to do, he's going to accomplish. Now, white. Why white? I believe the color white refers to finality. Anytime, for example, you have the white throne judgment, that's the final judgment. Mm. You have Jesus coming back on a white horse. That's because it's the final battle before the world goes to peace. You have white robes given to the believers. It's the final righteousness that we wear. So if that is true, and if I'm accurate on that, then the White Horseman is that final march toward the judgment of all nations. Mm.
And I think a clue as to the role there, or at least his, say, rank in the hierarchy of things in the spirit realm, is the fact that he's wearing a crown referred to as a Stephanos, whereas the crown worn by Jesus, Revelation 19, are many diadems, which is the crown of royalty.
Right.
And likewise, the beast that emerges from the sea, the Antichrist, in Revelation 13, is wearing diadems, again, crown of royalty, as opposed to a laurel leaf crown, right. which was adopted by the Roman emperors. Right. Again, the idea of a global empire that is arising. I'm really interested, though, the opening of the pathway for Israel to become a nation, and clearly the fall of the Ottoman Empire opened up the Levant. There had been Zionists, Jews who had relocated the land, purchased land in what was then called Palestine. Right. There are some who might interpret this as, well, if this is the work of the White Horse Rider, then the rise of Israel must be a bad thing, because the four horsemen are bad, right? Right.
So I think we got to get away from the connotation that they are inherently evil, because I believe they are God's military forces, mm-hmm. sent to do bad things as far as the nations are concerned. But as far as any kind of judgment is always going to be viewed as bad. Anytime God judges a person, look at Israel. You look at Deuteronomy when God says, if you don't obey me, all these curses will come upon you. And it's things like, you're going to die, there's going to be pestilence, disease, you're going to be kicked out of the land. All of these harsh things. Does God really do that? But it is how judgment functions. There has to be consequence for bad actions. And so it is with nations. There has to be consequence for bad actors, bad actions among the nations. And so the four horsemen have to bring that bad news. They have to form it.
So ultimately, this final kingdom that John the Revelator used, for which John the Revelator used Babylon as a symbol, what is this going to look like, and how are events today leading toward that?
Right. So I connect the ark back to, excuse me, Babel. And Babel was a scattering of peoples. The earth was all one language, for example. They were building this edifice. They were connecting to the underworld. So that got dispersed. But then at the other end of the ark, you have it being reconstructed. Because the intention was Babel needed to be judged. But God was going to allow all the iterations of it to develop for his purpose. We have to figure out how to be kings and priests, so there has to be adversarial kingdoms and forces. And then in the end, he's going to judge those this nefarious rulers and nefarious rebels. And that's why he brings it all back together and says, I'm going to take the whole thing, I'm going to reconstruct it, and then I'm going to judge it. I'm going to pour out my indignation upon it. And Jesus is going to come back, disperse it, and then we have peace. You know, I know it's really oversimplified there, but it's a construct that I believe we can now plug the four horsemen into.
Well, Babel as the prototype for what is to come on the earth. We're going to talk about that when we return on Unraveling Revelation.
We'd love to meet you. Here are a few of the places you can find Sharon and Derek Gilbert in the months ahead. Mysteries of the Bible Verse Conference, June 13th and 14th in Indianapolis. The Go Therefore Conference, July 25th and 26th in Brookville, Ohio. The Remnant Rising Conference, August 22nd through 24th in Springfield, Missouri. For the latest information, go to gilberthouse.org/calendar.
Welcome back to Unraveling Revelation. I'm Derek Gilbert. Again, please download our free mobile app to your smartphone or tablet. It's a way of getting all of our video content, not just this weekly program, but our weekly Bible study, Sharon's new podcast, The Armored Sheep. Well, I'll tell you, if you haven't seen that little cute sheep logo that she developed for that, it's very appropriate because that's what we are. We're following the shepherd. We ourselves, holding our little, defensive armaments, but she does a wonderful job with that, and you can get it every week right to your smartphone or tablet, iOS, Android, Amazon, Kindle Fire. We've even got versions for Roku, Amazon Fire TV, Apple TV. It is free, and you'll find the links at our website, gilberthouse.org/app. Curtis Liebel is our guest. We're talking about his book, The Four Horsemen, and Babel as a template for what is to come. It seems like the fallen realm have been pushing us towards cities. I mean, this is one of the key points of the World Economic Forum's Great Reset, which they've rebranded because we figured out what that phrase means. 15-minute cities. They want us all living together in cities. How is Babel, or what are the characteristics of Babel that you see that will be fulfilled again in the end times?
Right. So coming at this with the first concept that a city is a power structure. Another example in our modern times would be that in the United States during election time, it's major cities that shape and move our political system. Why do they have so much power, right? And of course, I'm not going to get into our forefathers and the electorate system and all that, but the idea is that cities have power. And so prototype, you go back to Babel, are there identifying markers in the first major rebellious city that's detailed that give us an idea of what all cities contain? And I believe there are. There's 6 things I believe. The first, a city is defined by language. Babel was uniquely destroyed by giving people different languages. That's seeded the nations. It's seeded ethnicities. It's seeded everything that exists today. And so language becomes a commonality. When you have people of the same language, they pool together, that becomes part or a basic of a city. Then you have location. The great Mesopotamian civilizations were centered around the Euphrates and the Tigris rivers. And so location becomes key. And when cities are located in special places, New York City is located in a harbor just across from Europe, it becomes a focal point. It is actually our, a place where we had, the fall of the Twin Towers, we have the stock market, we have in Wall Street, we have, of course, the United Nations building, all of it's located in a city. So location becomes important. And then we have a key one of the key ones that I think is religion. I believe, as you well point out in the Mesopotamian civilizations, they all had some kind of connection to a pantheon, an idea, and you talk about the renaming of pantheon entities, just a reshaping using the same forces. Right, whether it's the Inanna or Ishtar or its iterations
Astarte
of
in the Bible,
Astarte
right,
or Asherah, and so we have these same power players that are just working on dominating or keeping these civilizations and cities under control. So that's a component. Anytime you have a city, look for the religious power structure. Commerce. Cities are built on commerce. Alexander the Great, in his era, was able to run through the entire world at the time, civilized world, because of commerce roads that were made by the Persians specifically. And if you look at the first postal system, it was made by the Persians, at least noticeable one, and then all of the ancillary cities that were connected by roads and commerce. Well, that was gave Alexander the Great like a 10-year run to just dominate the world, unseen before in history. So commerce becomes a key. Leaders, every great city usually has a dynamic, leader. And of course, we can't fail to mention Nimrod, right? But take the Nebuchadnezzars of Babylon, take the Hammurabis, take the Alexander the Greats, and then his 4 generals who created the 4 districts. It's always built around a leader, and the pharaohs, another good example. But what were the leaders? The leaders were considered, as you well talk about, they were demigod status people. In other words, they were considered by the masses to have a divine connection to the pantheons, to the underworld. We talk about how the pharaoh goes into his temple and he comes out this demigod, and therefore, no matter who he was worshipped as having divinity. And so this is a key aspect of cities. And then finally, a military. Nimrod, it says he was a hunter of men, or a great hunter, and I believe he was a hunter of men. And that really describes kind of inference-wise an army. And you can't have 6 cities and power structures without a military force to enforce it. So again, we have these 6 key figures, key elements of a city, and I find that they keep reproducing over and over again in all cities.
And we're living in an age where you could make the case that the underlying language that runs our computer devices, regardless of whether you're using your device in English or Chinese or Spanish or whatever, there's an underlying language that is universal, the machine language that runs the actual code that's being executed on these devices. So in a sense, we've already gotten back to a single language,
right?
Because computers run the world, microprocessors, semiconductor chips run the world.
Well, you want to hear something crazy about that?
Please.
The language app, that's been introduced in the last 20 years that teaches people language. It's called Babel.
Right.
I mean, that's just a great coincidence, right?
Oh, yeah. I'm sure they thought they were trying to evoke the memory of it, but still, yeah.
But it's like signs hidden in plain sight.
Right.
And is this really what's happening? I think it is.
Our friend Carl TEICHRIB has written about the global religion that is being pushed through the United Nations, and some very prominent globalists behind the scenes at the UN. Commerce, again, we're interconnected via computers, where commerce is now no longer limited by the existence of Persian roads or Roman roads.
Right.
We live out here in the middle of the Ozarks, and we can basically go online, order something, and boy, it comes from Amazon the next day.
It's amazing.
So we are very nearly at this location. I guess the one final thing would be a global military. How, if you had to project ahead and see how this might come to pass, how do you think this might take shape?
So we have loose alliances like NATO, for example. Birthed out of our World Wars I and II, we had the Allied forces and the Axis forces. And so we had the underpinnings, I believe, of this cooperation. But what the events of Revelation that really tell us that there needs to be at some point a policing is going to be these celestial and geological events that happen, the earthquakes. If there's that mountain that's burning, it falls to the earth. That's perhaps an asteroid. So some natural disaster, which is going to cause these powers that be to control the masses. Mm-hmm. One really big sign is something you were alluding to a little bit there, and that is the control of commerce or money. We know that the beast system is going to give everyone a name and a mark, or a number and a mark, and they're going to not be able to buy or sell unless they have that. And how are you going to enforce that unless there's some type of policing, some type of military? Now, we saw in the COVID lockdown, it was like the precursor. It was like the test run. Let's mm-hmm. see how the world responds to this pandemic. Now, you can believe what you want about how the pandemic came, whether it was by accident or by forces that be, okay. But the fact is, it happened. And the reaction of the power structure was to lock everyone down. It shut down businesses. There was the largest transfer of wealth in our last decade that happened during COVID. That money went somewhere when those businesses closed and other businesses gained that patronage and they gained the money, even the stock market exchanges. All of this was a transfer of wealth and a transfer of power. And so is the military going to be a physical army, or is it going to be an enforcement?
Your final chapter of the book, The Final Ride of the Four Horsemen, how close are we to seeing that? And I'm kind of infamous for doing this, rolling three questions into one. And what relationship does this ride have to the opening of the seals, and when did those seals open? Good question.
I think a lot of people are looking for those seals to open now. We've got our eyes on everything. Prophecy, watchmen on the wall, people are looking for this first seal to be broken. I believe we need to shift our thinking, in my opinion, and that the seals, the first four seals have been broken. I go into the book as to when and why, which is a larger discussion. Mm-hmm. But I believe there's a timepiece that tells us where we're at, and that is this idea of the fifth seal being broken and the martyrs, or the souls under the altar. Mm-hmm. If we can time when that is, and I believe we can show where that is, then the four seals must have been opened already, because that's the fifth seal.
Sure.
And so if that's the case, and I make the case as strongly as I believe I've been shown it, that we are at that point, then our eyes should be on something else, and that is the final iteration of what the Four Horsemen are bringing together. So they haven't stopped writing, right? So they start writing, and it's not a one-time event, it's a ride, which means they keep writing until they accomplish their purpose. And rather than a 7 or a 10-year march, I believe that's more like a 100-year march. You can't shift world powers in a short period of time. Mm-hmm. It takes a long time to get there. But even, say, 100 years in the view of prophecy is just a very small period of time.
Sure. So these seals already open. Would these be the final set of instructions then for the Four Horsemen?
Yeah. I think it's the final manifestation of their missions. So, we, again, so much to unpack here. We don't have time to talk about all their mission parameters, but I do tackle them in the book. I believe once we see the mission, then we can see how the last part of that mission is going to play out in our time. And then we can look for it.
Okay.
What does that look like? And I know I'm being a little vague right now, but it's a lot to unpack.
Yeah.
And but well, I believe that conversation needs to be put on the table, because now instead of looking for these first 4 seal events, we're looking at the culmination of years of effort being put into more of a last mission event.
The good news then, in our last couple of minutes then, because again, I think people have this idea, and it's been reinforced for years by Bible teachers, by Hollywood, that the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse are a horrifying, terrifying, bad news thing. We don't want this to happen, rather than something that must take place as part of God's plan of redemption for earth and for all of us who have placed our faith in Jesus Christ. What is the good news in all of this for Christians?
Well, the good news is that God has all things in his hands. That whatever's happening around us in this formation of the global cabal and the fear that it can incite is a planned and a managed change of events, theopolitical events, that God is in control of. And if we, as we are believers in Jesus, and we are protected under that covenant, we are part of his plan. He has a plan for us to go through this time, or even be removed from this time, and not be overtaken. And that's where our faith is. You know, it's our faith in the fact that he is faithful. He protected the children of Israel in Egypt when the last part of the plagues came. And they made it through. They were taken out whole, and they were victorious on the other side of the Red Sea event. We're going to be victorious. We just have to be patient.
Amen. How do people follow your work, your ministry, and what you're working on?
Yes, thank you for asking. Not only do we have the book, The Four Horsemen, but I have a website. It's called the Zerubbabel Report. And it can be found by just typing in thezreport.org. But on there, I have other documentation. I have more information. I also connect people with other works that are going to be coming out. I've got some other book ideas that are going to feed into what I've already written. It's going to give me a chance to kind of bring it into what is more, we would say, specifically for our day. And so, yeah, stay tuned there. Look at that, and you'll find out some, hopefully, wonderful things.
Thezreport.org.
Yes.
Okay. Well, that's the good news about the Word of God, is you never run out of material.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, thank you, Curtis, for joining us here.
Thank you, Derek.
The book is The Four Horsemen. Curtis Liebel is the author, and a fresh take on the Four Horsemen. And if nothing else, the encouragement that knowing that they're only doing what God is allowing them to do. Or as Jesus said, be not afraid. Thank you for joining us. I'm Derek Gilbert. This is Unraveling Revelation.
Unraveling Revelation is a viewer-supported outreach of Gilbert House Ministries. Contact us through our websites or drop us a line at P.O. Box 78, Crane, Missouri, 65633.